Good morning. It is 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, May the 4th, 2021. We want to welcome you to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center. And we want to say a very special welcome to David G. Burnett from the Dallas ISD and Indian Creek from the Southwest ISD. Thank you so much for joining us today. Teachers, if you're watching and you have not signed up, please do so. Go to www.tiny.cc/EEC register. We would appreciate it. Program today will be characteristics of plants and animals. During this virtual field trip, students will investigate how the external characteristics of an animal are related to where it lives, how it moves, and what it eats. Students will also identify and compare the parts of plants. The 4 programs will be characteristics of amphibians, characteristics of birds, characteristics of reptiles, and characteristics of plants. Couldn't say that one. All right, you cannot ask us a verbal question, but you can go to www.tiny.cc/EEC /question/answer. Send us your question in as long as it pertains to the program. We'll do our best to answer it during the program. If not, I'll send the answers to your teacher and they can discuss it with you. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we're going to let Mr. Monroe tell us all about amphibians.
Good morning, students. My name is Mr. Monroe, and we're going to be looking at or investigating the characteristics of a very special group of animals that we call amphibians. Well, you know, there are lots of groups of animals that have been put together because of likenesses or similarities in their behavior, their structure, even what they eat, how they go through their life processes even. Everything that organism or that animal does to stay alive. I love amphibians simply because they are a very unique group of animals. They're called amphibians simply because they live part of their life in water and then part of their life on land. Whether you know it or not, there are 63 different kinds of amphibians found in this state alone, the state of Texas. And 42 of those species or kinds belong to a group that we call frogs or toads. Frogs, salamanders, and toads are among the most well-known amphibians. And remember, they spend part of their life in water and part of their life on land. Now, while we're investigating their characteristics and how some of those characteristics help them to survive in the environment in which they live, there are a couple of questions I want you all to be thinking about. These may be questions that your teacher might even ask you later on. For example, question number 1. I imagine your teacher might want you to be able to name 2 characteristics of amphibians. Question number 2, or something else that you should think about while we're going through this program, is why is water important to amphibians? So here we go. You know, amphibians are very important to us, students, simply because they can be environmental indicators, and they can also cut down the number of bugs and insects in an area. And you know, if we look at all the living things that live on our planet, students, there are more bugs and insects than any other living organism. And so animals like amphibians, groups of animals like amphibians that consume a lot of bugs and insects, they keep that population down to where we can deal with it. We can live with the bugs and insects. But can you imagine if amphibians weren't around and other organisms that eat bugs and insects, what this world would be like? We would be overrun with bugs and insects. Now listen, amphibians belong to a much larger group of animals. You know, when we're talking about the animal kingdom, we're talking about all the animals that live in the world today. And we're talking about 2 major groups of animals. animals that do have a backbone and animals that don't have a backbone. Animals that have a backbone, we say that they are vertebrates. They belong to the group of animals we call vertebrates. Animals that don't have a backbone, we call that group invertebrates. A perfect example of an invertebrate would be a spider, a grasshopper, a millipede, and those organisms belong to a group of organisms that we call arthropods. Now, they don't have bones or skeletons inside of them. They don't have a backbone, so they would be perfect examples of the invertebrate group. But frogs and toads and salamanders, they do have a skeletal system within their bodies. And they belong to a group that we call vertebrates. And just to prove that, I have a model skeleton of a frog. And if we look at this, we can see that inside a frog's body, there are bones. He has feet that have jointed appendages like fingers. The forearms up here, the forelegs, we can see looks like little hands. And then we have right here what we call the backbone, which is holding all the rest of this basically together. That backbone is very important to that organism, and that makes a frog a vertebrate. Now, amphibians also are unique in the fact that they are cold-blooded. A frog swimming in raw water, guess what? That frog's body temperature is going to match the temperature of the water. In fact, cold-blooded, there's a word that means the same thing that you guys will probably use that word a lot when you get in the upper grades, and that is the word ectothermic. That means the heat for their body comes from without, outside, okay? So their temperature, their body temperature is going to be the same as the surroundings. If a frog's swimming in cold water, that means he's going to be as cold as the water is that he's swimming in. Now, you know what? Because of that, they are very sensitive to real cold temperatures. So they have to protect themselves when winter comes and it gets very, very cold consistently, temperatures are low. They do like bears do. They go into a deep sleep that we call hibernation. Reptiles and amphibians that are exposed to cold temperatures in the winter, they will disappear. They'll find a place to go down in a hole or bury themselves, and they go into a deep sleep until warm weather, meaning that the warm temperatures come back consistently, and that usually happens in spring, they wake up. Now, living part of their life in water, part of their life on land, man, they go through a life cycle change that's almost like a butterfly goes through its changes in its life cycle. We call that metamorphosis. Now, a frog simply starts out as an egg. When the egg hatches, the first form of that organism is a tadpole. And I have a couple of tadpoles I want to show you. Now, those tadpoles also go through what we call growth and development stages. You know, one of the characteristics of living things is they have the ability to grow. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get taller or wider or bigger. It may be that their bodies are going to change in some other way. Tadpoles are a perfect example of that. Here, I have a real live tadpole. And if I can get him to stir up in there, you can see that he has a tail and he's swimming just like a fish would swim. He's under the water, so he breathes oxygen. You know, all living things need oxygen. He breathes oxygen just like a fish, okay? Now, later on in this tadpole's life, his body is going to go through some changes as he goes into a different stage. And I do have another tadpole that has gone in a different stage. Here is a tadpole, and if you look real close, you'll see that he's got legs. He's got both his front and back legs, and he still has his tail. He's a little larger than the first one I showed you, so he is further along in the stages of its life cycle. Eventually, that tail is going to fall off, and he's going to become an immature frog, okay? And once he becomes an immature frog, then eventually he's going to start getting bigger, because these were bullfrog tadpoles I just showed you. Eventually, they're going to become a full-fledged bullfrog, just like Hoppy here. This is Hoppy, the bullfrog. Now, Hoppy has some body parts that are characteristics that help him survive in his environment. Now, that part, as a tadpole, they spend swimming in water. Once they become a full-fledged frog, they start spending time around the edge of the pond, okay? Now, they do have to get back in that pond to do a bit of swimming. So he's got web feet. See these big old web feet he's got? Those help him to swim in that pond. He's also got a color that helps him blend in with the vegetation around the edge of the pond. He's got little front hands here on those legs there. And you know what, guys? He's an excellent bug catcher. Look at his eyes. You think he can see bugs? Oh, yeah. So not only, and he does have a backbone. I'm feeling his backbone here. He also has real smooth skin, slimy, wet skin. And you know what? That's a characteristic too, because you know what? Not only does he breathe oxygen through lungs, he also breathes oxygen, or he takes oxygen from the air through his skin. And for him to get it through his skin, meaning that his skin is permeable, meaning air can go through it, you know, he needs to do that because he has a 3-chambered heart, okay? And so basically lungs just don't give him enough oxygen. Now, if his skin should dry out, guess what would happen to Hoppy? He would die from suffocation. He wouldn't be able to get enough oxygen. Now, inside his body, he's got this real long tongue. I was telling somebody the other day that accidentally stuck my finger in there, and Hoppy bit on my finger, but it didn't hurt. He just kind of clamped on it because he doesn't have teeth. You know, frogs and toads, they swallow their food whole, okay? So I'm gonna put Hoppy back up. Remember, he started out as an egg. He hatched from the egg into becoming a tadpole and went through some stages of growth and became a full-fledged adult American bullfrog, okay? Now, that skin makes Hoppy and other amphibians environmental indicators because they're pulling air or oxygen through their skin. If there's pollutants in that air, guess what? That could make Hoppy sick and he could probably die. Or if the water is polluted and has toxins in it, guess what? He has to keep his skin wet. And if that toxin or poison's in the water, guess what? That could kill Hoppy also. So if you have a pond that has a lot of frogs in it and around it, guess what? That means your pond or lake is pretty healthy. And you know, some amphibians, they vocalize. That means they make sounds. Frogs are bad about that. In fact, the other day when we were getting rain, the frogs around our pond, oh, they were really cutting up. You could hear them. You could hear them all the way out in front of the building. And a lot of people think that's kind of disturbing. But you know what? A long time ago when I was a little person, a little fella, my great-grandmother used to tell me the frogs were making that sound because they were calling for more rain, okay? Now, there's one other amphibian that does the same thing that a frog does. They start out from an egg, they hatch into a tadpole, and they go through that developmental stages to become a toad, like this guy. Now, his skin is a little rough, but his skin still has to have a little moisture in it for the same reason that Hoppy skin has to stay moist. And if you look at this toad's body, he's got little bitty legs and a great big body. If you compare it to Hoppy's body structure, you will note that Hoppy's legs look muscular. I'll get him back out in just a second to show you. But this toad went through the same developmental stages that hoppy went through. First becoming a tadpole, and of course, the toad tadpoles are a lot smaller than the bullfrog tadpoles. That's one way you can tell the difference. Now, this guy, look at him. This is a giant toad, okay? He's puffing up right now to kind of scare me. They try to make themselves look a little bit larger than what, a great deal larger than what they normally would look like, just to scare off anything that would be messing with them, okay? So I'm gonna put the toad back. And let's look at Hoppy one more time. You remember what the toad's legs look like? Look at Hoppy's legs, oh, muscle legs. And this guy, if I was to put him down on the floor and take a measurement of how far he could jump, I bet he could easily jump a distance of somewhere between 6 to 8 feet, okay? Maybe even more. All right. Now, frogs are very important. It's a necessity that they spend time around water. Now, Hoppy's a male. If he was a female, then definitely would need to spend time in the water and around water, simply because where did we say they spent the first part of their lives? In water. Those eggs are in water. They hatch in water. Those little tadpoles swim in water. So there you have it. Water is very important to amphibians. And I don't have a salamander to show you guys, but they're more like a small lizard, but they have wet, slimy skin. And that skin does the same thing that the skin does for Hoppy and the toad. Now, if any of you have any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman, and maybe he can answer those questions for you. You guys have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe and Hoppy and Toad. We do have a question. What is the largest amphibian in the world? The largest amphibians are the giant salamanders of China. They can grow more than 5 feet in length and weigh well over 100 pounds. That's a pretty big salamander. And now Ms. Fuller is going to talk to us about birds.
Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Mrs. Fuller. Welcome to my lab. And this is my lab assistant. Her name is Lauren Chicken. Lauren Chicken is a bird. She's covered in feathers. Only birds have feathers. One other thing she did this morning, which was very nice, she laid an egg. Can you see this egg she laid? Isn't that lovely? Now, a lot of animals lay eggs, but birds, that's the only way that they have babies, is by laying eggs. I'm going to show you some feathers. I'm going to put Lauren Chicken down. Here you go. Okay. Let me show you. Pick her back up. Look at her wing. Can you see those real strong feathers there at the end? Those are called flight feathers. And this is a flight feather, but not from my chicken. My chicken doesn't fly very far. These are real strong. The shaft part is very strong. And the filaments on the feather part are hooked together. This is so that they can push against the air to enable the bird to fly. Another kind of feather we have is a down feather. This keeps the bird nice and warm. Look how soft and fluffy down is. You might have a pillow at your house with a down feather. Now, another kind of feather, when she was batting her wings, she made it fly away. So I don't know where it went, but it's a contour feather. And contour feathers lie right up against the bird's body and make the bird aerodynamic, so it'll slip through the air, make it easy to fly. And another kind of, oh, here it is right here. Here's a contour feather. And here is a feather from a peacock, but it's got a different function. The tail of the peacock is full of these fancy feathers. And when he fans his tail out, they're just all these all across, makes him look enormous. And also, it looks like he's got a lot of eyes. So it's going to kind of make someone think twice before they go over and try to mess with him. The other thing is, this is very attractive to the peahen, the female bird. So this has two functions. One is to make him look very large, and the other one is to attract a mate. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to talk about other characteristics of birds. So bear with me for one little minute while I turn my PowerPoint on. And characteristics of birds. Now we've got 3 different birds here with 3 different kinds of mouths. They also have different kinds of feet. Now the bird on the left is a mallard duck. This is the drake, the male. His feet are webbed because he has to swim in the pond. He has a bill that it's a rounded kind of mouth that makes it easy for him to get plants to eat, but allows the water to drain out. The bird in the middle is a kestrel. This is the smallest bird of prey in Texas. It's got a very sharp, pointy, curved beak that helps him kill the little animals and eat them. You can't see his feet, but he has talons. He's got very sharp, pointy toenails that help him catch prey. And the little bird over on the right is an eastern bluebird, and he's got the kind of mouth that is not that is going to eat things that are appropriate for him. He is not a predator bird, and he is not an aquatic bird. So his little feet are the kind that grasp the branch. Okay, now let's think of some essential questions. As you watch this program, think of different things to answer these questions. Number 1, name 2 characteristics of birds. Well, we already have talked about feathers. We know only birds have feathers, so that's 1 right there. Number 2, name a bird that only eats plants. Name a bird that only eats meat or insects. Name a bird that eats both meat, insects, and plants. So, characteristics of birds. Birds are warm-blooded. That means they've got a sophisticated brain that can control their body temperature. Number 2, birds have feathers. And we've already talked about the feathers, how the feathers are a body covering that keep them warm, keep them aerodynamic, enable them to fly, and help them attract mates, and also scare off predators. Birds have beaks or bills. The bird's mouth is adapted to what its food is. Number 4, birds lay eggs. A lot of animals lay eggs, but that's the only way that birds have babies. Birds that eat plants are herbivore. Herb means plant, vor means eater. So the little purple finch on the left is eating a sunflower seed. If you'll look at the very unique mouth, the beak on this purple finch, you'll see it's perfect for cracking open seeds. If you'll look at the little hummingbird over on the right, the hummingbird has a very tiny, long, pointy beak, and this enables the hummingbird to reach way down into these tubular flowers and drink nectar. Birds that eat meat or insects are carnivores. Carne means meat, vor means eater. They eat meat. So the one on the left is our friend the kestrel, our smallest bird of prey in Texas. And he will eat things like insects, mice, voles, small things, because he is a small bird. The animal on the right is much, much bigger than a kestrel. This is a horned owl. And they eat rats and moles and voles and mice and other birds and snakes. But they just eat meat, carnivore. And birds that eat both plants and meat are called omnivore. Omni means all or everything. Vor means eater. They'll eat everything. The mockingbird, the state bird of Texas, on the left, eats insects and things like that during the summertime. But in the winter, when the insects are pretty much gone, he eats berries and other kinds of things like that. So he's an omnivore. The 2 birds, the 2 black colored birds in the middle are corvids. The one on the top is a crow and the one on the bottom is a raven. These two types of birds, plus magpies, are very, very intelligent. The raven is probably up there in the top birds as far as intelligence is concerned. They can recognize people by their faces. They can use tools. They can develop empathy. That means that they can have sympathy for people and for other birds. And they grieve. They're very, very intelligent, and they are omnivores. They eat plants, meat, and carrion, dead flesh. Over on the right, you've got a turkey and a chicken, and they eat bugs, and they also eat chicken scratch and other kinds of meat like that. So, not meat like that, food like that. Now let's do a feather challenge. Ask an adult for a feather. It doesn't have to be big. Look at it with a hand lens. What do you see? Can you draw the feather? Up at the top, we see our lovely down feather. At the bottom on the right, we see a contour feather, and the two magnified pictures on the left are of a flight feather, and it shows you what it looks like up close. Very interesting. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. If you have any questions about birds, Dr. Gorman will be more than happy to answer those questions. Have a delightful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. And yes, we do have a couple of questions. What is the largest bird in the world? And what is the smallest bird in the world? The largest bird in the world is the common ostrich from the plains of Africa and Arabia. A male ostrich can reach the height of 9 2/10 feet. That is 3 feet taller than I am and weigh over 344 pounds. That's a big bird. Wouldn't you hate to eat that drumstick? Okay, the smallest bird, it's called the bee hummingbird. It has a weight of 2 grams. You know the little pink sweet and low packages that your mom or dad or somebody puts in the coffee or their tea sometimes? Those things weigh 1 gram. So the weight of 2 of them, that's all that little bird weighs. Now here is the length of his body, this black line that I have put across here, 2.2 of an inch. That's as big as he is. Now 2.2 inches compared to 9 feet and 2 inches. That's a big difference. Thank you, Lauren and Ms. Fuller. Ms. Nash, tell us about reptiles.
Welcome to my classroom. Today we're going to meet our scaly friends, the reptiles. So we're going to start with some turtles. So turtles are a really ancient group of reptiles. They've been here since the time of the dinosaur, and they're still here. Probably largely because of this great adaptation, the shell. All turtles have a shell that protects them. And sometimes children think that a turtle can take its shell on and off. If you look inside, you see those bones. Okay? And the shell is part of the skeletal structure. It grows as the turtle grows. Okay? Like your bones grow inside your body as you grow, the turtle shell grows with the rest of the animal. So I've got 2 turtles to look at today. One from the pond, the slider, and one from the forest. So they live in 2 different habitats, a pond and a forest. So the slider is green, okay. It's a kind of streamlined shell. And if you would cooperate, you would stick its feet out and you can see he has webbed feet for swimming like that, like Hoppy, the bullfrog. Okay. Webbed feet for swimming. Let me get the box turtle out. Let's compare them. So the box turtle lives in the forest, okay, or the grassland. And they're not a swimming turtle. They've got walking feet. See those walking feet there? Okay. And they are brown. Okay. That's a way to hide in those brown leaves on the forest floor, the brown grass in the grassland. And the shape of their cell is different. This guy's pretty fast in the water. Okay. Streamlined. They're both omnivores, and what that means, they eat both plants and worms or insects that they might catch. Okay. And this guy in particular can live a long, long time, up to 100 years. Okay. This one won't get any bigger, but this one can get about 2 or 3 times as big as it is now. Okay. And again, a different habitat, so different color, different body shape, different feet. Okay. Another really ancient reptile are the crocodiles. Of course, we don't have any crocodiles here because they would be very dangerous. But the crocodile is really interesting because it's one of the few reptiles that takes care of its young. And the mama crocodile or mama alligator will guard her nest. Okay, be careful, don't go near. And when the baby crocodiles or alligators hatch, mama crocodile will take them in her gigantic toothy mouth to a safe place and stay with them and protect them for quite a while. So really interesting behavior. Most reptiles lay eggs. Crocodiles, alligators lay eggs, turtles and tortoises lay eggs. The snakes some of them are live bears. Let's look at the last, with the tuatara. There's one more. Turtles and tortoises, alligators and crocodiles. The tuatara, which we don't have, they only live in New Zealand. Very rare, very, very ancient. And the last group of reptiles are the lizards and snakes, the squamata. They're very closely related. And let's look at a little lizard here. A leopard gecko, spotty tail, okay, and big eyes. They're nocturnal. They come out at night. He's an insectivore. He likes to eat insects. And he does not like to be handled. He's got the bumpy, scaly skin. So the scaly skin of reptiles protects them from drying out. Reptiles that lay eggs can lay their eggs on land. Oh, Red's escaping. Come back here. Let's look at Red and think about scales and eggs. So Red is a rat snake or a corn snake. And we have them around here. The ones we have out in the woods are kind of brown. They are constrictors. See him sticking his tongue out? He's smelling with that tongue. He can see, he can feel, he can taste. And what sense have I left out? They don't have any, look at the head, there are no external ears. So they can't hear through the air the way we can. Really amazing animals. So they are all predators. All snakes are carnivores. Lizards, some of them are vegetarians and some are omnivores, but all snakes are predators. And they eat a wide variety of prey, from tiny insects up to large mammals and other reptiles. Okay, birds, they eat everything. The ones we find here are often in the chicken coop eating eggs. They like birds' eggs also. Now, look at the scales, okay. Cold, they're cold-blooded, okay. So that means that they're ectothermic, meaning their body temperature depends on where they are. So if it's warm, they're warm. If it's cold, they're cold. And if it gets too cold or too hot, they have to go skate mainly underground or down a tree trunk to maintain a kind of middle range of temperature. It's so beautiful. They shed their skin, and when they come out, they're shiny and beautiful like this. And the snakes and lizards are really closely related. Basically, snakes are lizards that lost their legs. What happened? So scientists think that an ancient lizard went underground to live, and underground legs got shorter and shorter till they disappeared. Eyelids got full of dirt, ears got full of dirt. They got rid of those. And they came out from underground and discovered that they could swim and climb trees and do all kinds of things. And so they're a very successful group, but evolution doesn't go backwards. So the legs will never come back. And that's a problem. If you're a predator, how do you catch and eat something if you don't have any legs? So some snakes like Red here are constrictors. That means they grab an animal, wrap around it with these powerful muscles in this body, long body, and squeeze it till it suffocates, and then they eat it. And of course, they have to swallow it whole. He can swallow things much larger than his head. He opens his mouth really, really wide. It's amazing. And some other snakes have done something even more amazing. They have venom. So a rattlesnake or a cottonmouth or a coral snake or a copperhead, those are our venomous snakes here. They're not poisonous, they're venomous. I can eat a rattlesnake if I ate rattlesnakes and I would not get sick. But if it bites me, I would be in trouble and I would have to go to the hospital. So I didn't get really in trouble. But that rattle tells you you're too close to me. Leave me alone, leave me alone. They do not want to bite you. You're too big to eat. So if you ever see any kind of a venomous snake, the coral snake, those colors tell other animals, be careful, don't bother me, you'll be sorry. They don't want to bite you, you're too big to eat, and you're a waste of venom. So if you any wild animal you see, just leave it alone. Okay, look at it maybe, but be careful and don't pick one up ever. Now, let's look at the snake skin really quick. Sure. Red thinks it would be a good time to go crawl away, crawl away. So you can see here those scales on the eyes. Okay, so ocular scale is another little one. Okay, so they crawl out of their skin. Okay, from the tip of the nose all the way to the tip of the tail. Pretty amazing animals and lots more to learn. The Dallas Zoo has a great reptile collection that you can go see. Also great information in books and on the computer and on TV about the wonderful, amazing reptiles. So if you have any questions, Dr. Gorman will be glad to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Nash and Red. We do like that. Now there was a couple of questions came in. What is the largest reptile in the world? And it is a saltwater crocodile. They are the largest crocodile species in the world and the largest living reptile in the world. The largest one was 22 feet long. That's a big guy. And also, are there any crocodiles in the United States? Yes, in South Florida, especially in the Key West area, they estimate there's between 500 and 1,200 saltwater crocodiles in the United States. And now we're going to change and let Ms. Ramirez tell us about plants.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about the different parts of a plant. So before we start our presentation, I have a couple of things I want to show you guys. The first is this really pretty flower. It's called pink primrose, and it gets that name because, of course, it is pink. But that's the flower, and you can see the petals that make up the flower. We know that the flower is attached to this long green thing. We call that the stem. And then attached to the stem, we have all of these green leaves. And then at the very bottom of our flower, we have the root. And the root is actually very important because it helps to anchor the plant into the dirt. And it also helps to transport water and nutrients from the soil to the other parts of the plant. So there's our pretty pink primrose. We have lots of these out here at the Environmental Center. And then here's one of my other favorite ones. This is a dandelion. It's technically a weed, but I like them. They have a pretty yellow flower on them. And then as they go through their life cycle, they lose the yellow petals. And then what's left behind would be these little seeds that you see here. And so when I was a kid, my mom would tell me that if I saw one of these, I could blow it and make a wish and my wish would come true. So we know that the wind can actually carry these seeds really far away. So there's our dandelion. And then I have this cool root system here. So back when we had that really cold freeze, when we had the snow and the ice, unfortunately, some of my plants at home didn't survive that cold. And this is a rosemary root. So you can see just how big the roots are from this plant. So again, roots are very important to help anchor and hold that plant in place. And it also helps to absorb that water and nutrients. So I'm going to go ahead and start our presentation. And I have a couple of questions for you guys. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to answer these two questions. The first question is, what are the basic parts of a plant? And the second question is, why are plant roots important? So keep those two questions in mind as we go through the presentation. And then of course we know that plants are important because we eat plants, but also our animal friends eat plants. And yesterday I went for a walk during lunch and I came back and my bowl of fruits and veggies that I had left on a chair was completely spilled all over the floor. And I knew my rabbit did it, but I wanted to catch her in the act. And so I put everything back into the bowl and I put it back on that same chair and I just waited and watched. And eventually she came back up and she did the exact same thing. So you guys probably met Mochi before in other videos. Mochi loves to eat fruits and veggies. And I learned that she actually loves to eat cilantro, which is what she's grabbing there. So that's Mochi the rabbit. So let's talk about this plant. This happens to be a tomato plant. So take a moment to see if you can identify the parts or the structures of this plant. So the science word for part is structure. So think about, can you name any of these structures for the plant? Also think about what is the job of each of those structures. And the science word for that job would be a function. So what is the function of each of those parts? And you can take a moment to pause the video to allow students to discuss their observations and what they think, but I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. So these are the main parts of a plant. Our plants can be divided into two main parts. So we have what's called the root system, which is what's below the soil, and then everything above the soil is the shoot system. So we're actually going to start with the root system first. So we notice that the roots are under the ground, and those roots are very important. As we saw earlier, they help to anchor the plant into the ground, and that way if it's super windy or very rainy outside, the plant doesn't get washed away. So it's an anchor. But the root also helps to take in water and minerals or nutrients that help the plant to grow. So that's the root. From the root, we have the stem, and the stem is the part that comes out of the ground. The stem is also important because it supports the plant and keeps it up nice and straight. The stem also helps to transport water and other nutrients to the rest of the plant. Then we have the fruit. Now, this happens to be a tomato plant. So we know that if we were to eat that tomato, we would see seeds inside the tomato. So the fruit houses the seeds and protects it. And then we have all of these leaves. The leaves have an important job too. Their job is to take in the sunlight, the water, and the air, and they combine all those to make food for the plant. And we call that process photosynthesis. And I know that's a big word, but all that word means that's just the process by which plants make their own food, and they need sunlight for that. And then we have our flowers here, which are my favorite part of the plant because they're the prettiest part, but they help in reproduction. So those are some of the basic parts of a plant, and I'm going to show you live examples of those in just a second. But before I do that, I have a quick challenge for you guys. It's a plant part scavenger hunt. So sometime this week or this weekend, look inside your house or outside and see if you can find examples of plants and see if you can identify their parts. So look for roots, flowers, stems, leaves, fruits, and seeds, and see if you can find at least 2 examples of each of those. And then here's a couple of examples to kind of get you guys thinking about what you can look for. And then in this example here, I actually found this in a grocery store. I found the fruit. So that's a dragon fruit. And I learned that it's actually a type of cactus that is native to Mexico. And I actually bought one of those fruits at the store, and I'll show it to you in just a second. So let me stop my screen share and pull up my regular screen. So here is the dragon fruit. It's also, some people call it a strawberry pear because it's kind of shaped like a pear, but it's kind of red in color. And this looks so interesting to me because it's a bright pink color and it has these pops of yellows and greens, but it is a fruit. So when I cut into it and looked in the inside, it was covered in seeds. And so this is what the inside looked like. I already ate most of the inside, so this is what is left. But look at all those little black seeds, and that white stuff is just the flesh of the fruit. So you actually eat the entire thing. And then the outside is just the hard covering. You don't eat that. But it is a very pretty color and very fascinating. So the next time you guys go to the grocery store with an adult, see if you can try something new to eat. There's lots of different fruits and veggies for you guys to try. The next thing I found at the grocery store was this, and it is a beet. I actually don't like these, but this is the part that people eat, the beet itself, and this is actually it grows under the ground. So you can actually see these crazy roots that are growing from the beet. So these are actually rather rough, and they have even smaller, finer root hairs attached to them. And what grabbed my attention was that beautiful purple color of the stem. So these stems are really pretty. And then attached to those stems, we have these nice big green leaves with the purple veins. And it looks all chewed up because, of course, Mochi, my rabbit, was eating these leaves. So that's the beet. We also have kale. For those of you that have seen this before, Spike, the bearded dragon, loves to eat kale. So, of course, this is the big leaf. And then we have the stem. One of my favorites is an herb, cilantro, and I like to eat it on my eggs and in guacamole. It also has a nice smell to it. So if you eat cilantro, you're eating the leaves, but I also like to eat the stem since I just cut everything all together. So we have the leaves and the stem for our cilantro. And I discovered that Mochi actually loves cilantro too. We have corn. If you guys eat corn, you're actually eating the seeds. So each of these kernels is actually a seed. And then we have the husk of the corn as well. And my last thing is a carrot. So we have the carrot, which we know grows under the ground. And we have part of the little root here, and we have all these little tiny root hairs that also help to take in that water and nutrients. We have our nice green stem, and then we have all of the leaves for our carrot as well. So those are just a couple of examples of things that you guys can find at the grocery store for fruits and veggies that we eat that actually come from plants and trees. You can see the roots and other things like that. So before we go, I have a quick little poem for you guys, and you guys can act it out with me if you would like. It's from Firefly Family Theater, and they do a much better job of singing it. So if you want to see their version, that's where it came from. But here we go. So we have roots, stems, leaves, and flower need sun, air, and a little rain shower. We start with a tiny seed in the ground. Buried in the dirt, the roots can be found. The roots get water and form a base. The roots will hold the plant in place. The stem holds the leaf up straight and tall. It helps to make sure the plant doesn't fall. The stem carries water up from the dirt. The stem helps keep the plant alert. The leaves are not just there for show. The leaves will work to help the plant grow. They take in sunlight and make it sweet. The leaves make food for the plant to eat. The colorful flower is so very bright. The bees will stop and rest in their flight. They pollinate the flowers and spread it around. Then the seeds will fall to the ground. We have roots, stem, leaves, and flower. And those are the basic parts of a plant. And that's all I have for you guys on the plant parts. We're going to give it back to Dr. Gorman to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ramirez. And we certainly did enjoy the last part of your little program there. The question is, what is the largest plant in the world? The largest plant in the world is the giant sequoia tree, as native to Sierra Nevada and California. It grows to an average height of 280 feet and is up to 24 feet in diameter. Specimens have been recorded as tall as 311 feet. Guys, that's the distance. That's a little bit bigger than a football field. You can imagine standing in a football field on its end and a tree being a little bit taller than that. I don't think so. Now I'm going to share my screen. During this virtual field trip, students investigated how the external characteristics of an animal are related to where it lives, how it moves, and what it eats. Students also identified and compared the parts of plants. The 4 parts of the program, characteristics of amphibians, characteristics of birds, characteristics of reptiles, and characteristics of plants. Thank you, teachers. How did we do? If you would, go to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback. Fill out a very short form. We would appreciate it. That lets us know if we're doing what you think we need to be doing. And we do appreciate you joining us today. Have a great rest of the day.